project starts, let's go to the next here. Lost some formats here. All right. Every project starts with a germ of an idea, but we don't always know the angle. And it's not until you get those tentacles, and Dwight talks about tentacles, and it's so true, and I think anybody who's researched a topic, sometimes you kind of have a broad idea of what you want to write about. Let's say, okay, my church, we were just using that as an example this morning. It's not really until you get into the beginning of your research that you discover what your angle or what your hook is. For example, Wilcox Park is another example. Stephen Wilcox, benefactor, he was also an inventor. And so I may think I'm doing a story on the beginnings of Wilcox Park and how the land came to be a gift to the city. I come to find out that he's the inventor of the sealed boiler that was used in all these World War II ships, and then there's like a whole other section of history regarding Wilcox. I was like, holy smoke, look at this, so I'm as fascinated, I hope, as my readers are when I uncover these, unexpected aspects of the research that come to light along the way. But anyway, even with a general idea of your topic, you kind of need to sort of hone in and focus in on, okay, where am I going with this, okay? Wilcox, in that example, I'm thinking, okay, I need some biographical stuff because he was a local figure, but he was also an inventor, and he was also in industry. Okay, so there's places where I know I'm going to go first to start my research. And again, a lot of times I get started and I don't know where I'm going to wind up in the end. And sometimes it's happened, or I start on a topic, come to the board meeting, and they go, well, how's that next newsletter article? And I'm like, you know what, I changed my mind, I'm not doing that at all. I found a little tentacle, and I decided to go with that one thread and maybe blow up that whole issue into a subject of its own. So that's what we'll do sometimes. But anyway, you do need to figure out, I think, the first thing we want to do is once we get that germ of an idea, then start to focus, okay, where do I want to go? Okay. And then, first thing I do, I'll admit it, I go to Google. But before we flip this, just so that you know, I just put down a few bullets, just, stream of consciousness here, thinking of, okay, where are the broad areas that you can go to look. So obviously, certain broad reference places will be where you want to go first. Shipwrecks, again, if I want to know anything about shipwrecks, I'm going to ask Dwight, because he's got the most writings about shipwrecks off of our coast than anybody else I know. Right? In fact, we've published at least one book of Dwight's all about the ships that have wrecked off our little coast right here. So, I would probably maybe first Google it, and see what I can find, but I'm also going to go to either Dwight's books or call up Dwight personally and see where are we going to go. I need to know about a certain ship, or I heard about this ship. And just let me digress for 1 second. About shipwrecks, funny thing, like Dwight wrote us a wonderful article last season about the wreck of the Menace. And I have to confess, when I heard about the wreck of the Menace, I said, you know what, everybody knows about the wreck of the Menace. We all know the story about the wreck of the Menace. And yet, when you get some fresh eyes onto a topic that perhaps is well known, you're going to find that next person who gets into that topic is going to find out something that none of us ever heard before. So that was rewarding. I enjoyed editing it, and I enjoyed publishing the newest story about the wreck of the Menace, because there were little tidbits in there that I had never heard as many times as I had heard about the topic. So it just goes to show you. I think even more difficult than something like the wreck of the Menace would be to write about the 1938 hurricane. Again, that's one, every time it comes up, for a couple of years when September would roll around, I'd maybe do another story about the hurricane, but that is probably one topic that it's going to be hard to find anything new on. But if anybody has some obscure knowledge about the 1938 hurricane that hasn't already been written, we'd certainly welcome it. Again, fresh eyes, fresh theories, fresh thoughts, always make for good reading. All right, so can we click? Let's click to the next one, the internet. Like, as I said, the internet, it's a good place to start. But you have to know what's out there. Google's fine. You're going to get a lot of garbage that you don't want in Google because it's popular things, or it's anecdotal, or it's really worthless. For those of you who have not been involved in academia in a couple of decades, Google Scholar is out there, and that is where you can find a collection of, down here you'll notice I have at the bottom JSTOR and EBSCO. These are databases that compile scholarly peer-reviewed works written by educators, professors, PhDs. Google Scholar has its share of this type of work. So the thing is, with Google Scholar, it's free. EBSCO, JSTOR, you need a subscription. So if you still remember your college library password and username, you can get into those databases. If not, you can always show up at the Westerly Library and they'll sign you on. But you have to go there, which is a lot more inconvenient than doing research at midnight in your pajamas. So we have that. At the end of our talk today, there's some papers over there. I've reproduced a couple of old articles from our newsletter that are actually program reviews from when we had other researchers visit and talk about their particular databases that are near and dear to their hearts. So one of them was the lady who came from the Rhode Island Historic Cemeteries. I can't remember the exact name of her organization. But it is they who maintain a particular database of historic cemeteries in Rhode Island. And this is an open database where, almost like Ancestry, where you can upload, if you have pictures of your family's historic tombstones, you can actually upload them for others to see. So there's an article about how to use that database, what its name is, how to work the different tabs that are on that cemetery database. Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission visited us in the spring this year, and that is under State of Rhode Island. You can just Google, if you Google that phrase. And by the way, I am going to pass out these slides later, so you don't have to worry about too much notes, but if there's other stuff, feel free to write. So there's an article about that. No, I'm sorry. You're going to see an article about the cemeteries database and the URI Special Collections presentation. We reviewed that lecture. So in those handouts, you'll see how to use that URI Special Collections, and there's their website there. But that was a wonderful talk because Special Collections at the University of Rhode Island not only has documents, some of them very old, they also have artifacts, which are interesting. All right, Facebook, the Westerly Historical Society has a Facebook page, but we don't currently maintain, we don't put a lot of content on there. All About Westerly is run by actually one of our board members, and she just did it for fun, and she's very fond of putting old postcards, old photographs. She likes to sift through eBay and actually buy old printed media. Her background is mixed media, she's retired now. That's Jo Pendola from our board. And so she very often, when she gets in the mood, she'll put up some old postcards or old black and whites, and that's one place where I certainly can get lost in. Think, oh, let's see what Jo's put up lately, and I'm in there, and next thing you know, an hour's gone by, because I'm just enthralled with old photos and things that she puts. Westerly Life is an internet-only publication. You can link to it through Facebook and get their feed. And there is a fellow who does most of their articles. His name is Greg Petties, and he also co-lectured here about a year or so ago about the sinking of the U-483 submarine off of Point Judith at the end of World War II. And so Westerly Life, surprisingly, you wouldn't know from the name, but westerlylife.com has a historical focus. Maybe they should change the name, because Westerly Life, you'd think, well, maybe they have lists of restaurants. No, it's really about the old days, and it's about historical topics. So I like Westerly Life quite a bit. I like Greg. In fact, I finally twisted Greg's arm and got him to buy a membership to Westerly Historical Society, and I'm hoping that he's going to also help us with our newsletter when time gets going. Why did I put up McBurney? Oh, it's down here. Can we forward one slide, and I just want to come back to this real quick. Ancestry.com. Again, if you don't have a membership to Ancestry.com, there are certain things you can find without buying a paid membership. That's not the version. Anyway. This is what I wanted you to see. You see all the colored dots. This is the Orlando Smith family tree, which I used in a previous lecture. And I had to go to Ancestry to figure out Orlando Smith's family tree. There were 3 Orlando Smiths: the grandfather, the son, and the grandson. The guy in the middle was married 3 times. The first 2 wives died. His second wife was cousins to his first wife. So in order to figure out who was who in this Orlando Smith story, I was frankly overwhelmed in trying to figure out all the names. I mean, basically, because his first and second wives were cousins, these half-siblings not only shared their father's DNA, but they shared each other's mother's DNA, because the first and second wives were first cousins. So when you're reading historical accounts, add to that the fact that, and we still do this today, my husband's family was famous for it, my mother's family even did it, maiden names show up as middle names. My mother's maiden name is Barry. She's one of the Providence Barrys, even though she never lived here. It goes back a generation. So my brother's middle name is Barry. My husband's family had Dean, Deanna, Deanne, Deirdre, but there was a last name Dean somewhere. My husband's middle name was Dean. So this Dean thing comes up, and then we had a couple of cousins who were born on the same year, but they both loved the name Dean so much, so now we have 2 first cousins, both first name Dean. That's kind of like stubborn New Englanders too, if you ask me. I'm not from here, so I can say that's my outsider's opinion of sometimes the funny things New Englanders do. But so this is it. So my point being, Ancestry.com invaluable when you're trying to figure out. We have some very old families. Again, the town's going to be 350 years old. The Potters, okay? How many Joseph Potters are there? And where's the one that I'm looking for? The guy that ran that shop back up in the North End with the mills. He had cousins and sons and grandsons and a lot of Joseph Potters. In fact, one of the Joe Potters in our lifetime was a retired president of Washington Trust Company, my old employer. So Ancestry, for me, has been a tool many times just to get so-called get the story straight as to who is who. I mean, with all these colors, I talk about the yellow family, the middle guy, the middle Orlando. He had his pink family, his green family, and his blue family, and the yellows were his siblings. So he had a bunch of kids. And 3 wives, and to straighten all that out, you do need Ancestry or some of these others which are less popular, but they're also out there. So, okay, so that brings us to Westerly Library Local History Room. One of these days I'm going to take the plunge and become a volunteer there, only because not so much that I'm interested in giving more hours to my community. I think there's a selfish reason why those who volunteer there do it. You are surrounded by facts, figures, names, places. It's just such a fascinating place to be, to spend time. And if you have no visitors, you're on your own and you can go picking through. The town directories are there, which are also available through Ancestry, by the way, I'm told, by the research librarian. Biographical files. If you go in the local history room, as you walk in, there's a desk. You go straight back this way onto your left, there's a couple of banks of filing cabinets. One of those 2 sets of filing cabinets have biographical files. It's all full of clips, newspaper clips. And I went in there one day and there was nobody around and I thought, oh, let me look at the Smiths. Of course, there's going to be a lot of Smiths. I'm no relation to Babcock Smith House. Tony and Gert are. They're direct descendants. But my husband's dad wound up, I looked under Smith and I thought, oh gosh, Arthur Smith, that was my husband's dad. I pulled out the file and someone had lovingly clipped newspaper articles about anything he'd ever accomplished in his life, and it was saved. And I thought, well, here's somebody who really isn't like a Stephen Wilcox. He wasn't famous for inventing anything, and he didn't donate land to the park. He was just a guy. But someone for a period of years had kept up this so-called biographical file where they would, you know, if it was about a person, they would clip, file it by last name. So what I like about the biographical files is it not only has newspaper clips, but I also looked up Julia Smith, the founder of the Westerly Historical Society. In there, typed on an old typewriter, well, it's old now, was her eulogy that her spiritual leader from her church delivered upon her death. And I thought, wow, that was nice. You know, you can actually see, because we love Julia Smith. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. And to actually put your hand on a paper from 1964, I think was the year of her death, that showed what they said on the, you know, when they buried her. That was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. It was something that was saved, and the fact that it wasn't ever in the newspaper is just kind of neat to see, because it makes itself rather obscure in that case. All right, so these are the things you can find. Where are we? The history room continue. Can you back up there one? Now, let's see. What slides are a little messed up here. Oh, well, let's stay here for a second. Check the time. Small State, Big History, Christian McBurney. He is going to be here next week, October 1st, same time, 2 o'clock. He has spoken. Christian McBurney maintains this website, Small State, Big History. That is a neat website because even if you're not writing for our newspaper, even if you've never gotten your stuff into a book, if you have a topic that you love and you've really researched it, send it to Small State Big History or info at Small State Big History. McBurney will read your stuff, and if he likes it, he'll publish it on the web. And its stuff is meticulously indexed, which is great. So McBurney spoke a couple of seasons ago upon the release of his previous book, and it was about spies of the Revolutionary War. Some folks said, oh, I thought that was kind of dry. I loved it. I loved it. There was intrigue. I actually picked up the book and read through it. Stories, you know, all this intrigue, double agents. The wife went to the divorced husband because she thought he was a Tory. He was really a double agent. She said, we have this communication. I know we're divorced now, but, you know, for the cause, do it for the cause. Would you deliver this? I think they were trying to, either had to get to the commander of the HMS Rose, which was a British ship off of Newport. He's like, oh, okay, I'll do as you say. He's, you know, old time's sake, I'll take it. But he was working actually for the colonists. So they unsealed it, read it, gave it to George Washington, and foiled her plan and the boyfriend whom she lived with at the time. So I'm like, that's better than any soap opera. Are you kidding, McBurney? I love McBurney when he came. So he's got a new book. I'm not sure of the title, but if you come back in a week, you're going to meet Christian McBurney and find all about his new book and his website, Small State, Big History. All right, so let's go and see. There should be a slide about the next one, about the library. See if I missed anything. No, there's something missing here. I don't know what happened. Our file got corrupted because that's not the way it should have been formatted. All right, the first slide before this is the other stuff we already, oh, Seaside Topics is in the local history room. That is a Watch Hill newspaper that ceased publications, I think, the later part of the 20th century. I don't have the exact year. But it ran from like 1906, I think, into the 1970s, perhaps beyond. And it only ran for like 10 weeks every summer in Watch Hill. But anytime we do a story about Watch Hill, we run to Seaside Topics. They had every minutia of detail, every so-called cottage, which are really to us mansions, but the summer folk who arrived this week, who's in town, and it had, you know, every name of every estate and their address and their phone number, so if the folks wanted to call one another, and everything about the social scene and the horseback, the steeplechase, the the soirees at the Watch Hill Yacht Club. And so anyway, Seaside Topics, that's the Watch Hill newspaper, summer newspaper. I wish our new archivist were here because he's a genealogy expert, and he is full-time genealogy expert working in Boston. He's a young fellow at the beginning of his career, but he already has an advanced degree in genealogy, and I think we may see more on genealogy. We may have more to offer when it comes to genealogy with Zach, on the board now. Up till now, we've pretty much shied away from genealogy. First of all, because our indexing, our search tools have been in need of upgrading, and he is fast at work on that. And second of all, we not only don't have the resources, but our files are not complete enough to be a go-to resource for genealogy. So we usually refer people out either to a professional, genealogist, I was going to say tree maker. Hey, Pam's back from the airport. But time may come when we can be more of a better resource for people who are looking for genealogies. So that's that. We talked about biographical files. There are town directories on the shelves in the local history room, military records both in local history room and at Ancestry. Now, missing a slide here, but I also want to mention the Westerly Sun, next to those biographical files by last name, where they have all the newspaper clippings and ephemera regarding people who lived in town in the 20th century. Next to that is another bank of file cabinets, the back of the local history room, where the Westerly Sun subject file is there. So people in these first two file drawers, subjects in the other two file drawers. And it's the same deal. They're clippings and they're by topic. So if you wanted to know, let's say, anything about the Washington Trust, which is more than 200 years old, so there's a lot of history on the Washington Trust Company. Anything else you can think of is worth looking there. Maybe you might not always find what you're looking for in the Westerly Sun subject file, but when you do, you can then go to your research librarian, who sits just outside the local history room, and ask her to pull the microfilm from the edition from which that clip was taken, and then she can provide you with the private reprinted copy off of microfilm. Westerly High School yearbooks. If you go to the Westerly Library website under Special Collections, and that's a euphemism for local history room, there's a spot where, in fact it's in green, they're just announcing it, it's just come online. They are now putting out the Westerly High School yearbooks. And I happened to click on 1985 as a random choice the other day, and looked under faculty, and lo and behold, two of our current board members, old photos from 30 years ago, are there. I saw Tom O'Connell's picture and Brenda Linton's picture. And I thought, well, they aged very well, I must say. Actually, they still look very nice. So they don't have all the yearbooks, so if you know anybody in town who has an old yearbook and would like to offer it for scanning to the research area at the Westerly Library, please come forward, offer it. I think they have a way of scanning it and give it back to you. So there's some years that it'll say image not available, but there are, most of the recent years are there, and then there are some gaps. But it's kind of fun, so if you wanted to, if you're researching a particular personality from town who perhaps had a stellar high school career, whether through athletics or academia, you might find something about them in their old yearbook. The Westerly Library research area also has a vast photo collection secured in a small room off of the local history room. They refer to it lovingly as the vault. It's not really a vault, kind of a vault, but it's a locked room. And those things can be viewed and or handled with special permission, and you would have to coordinate with your research librarians to get those access to those materials. Just as an aside, the Westerly Historical Society inherited the entire glass plate collection of photographs from the Westerly Sun, which is our town newspaper, because they moved and could no longer store them. I love the old photos because they're so densely pixelated that even if you just take a digital copy, once they've been scanned and turned into a digital copy, when you drop one of those into the newsletter, for example, it just is so clear. The detail on those photos is not like any photography that we're used to seeing nowadays. So I'm in love with the old photos for that reason too. Library has old maps. Now, Margaret Weiss Brown, the children's author, I don't know if any of you know that there's the Runaway Bunny statue in our downtown park. That is a memorial to Margaret Weiss Brown, who wrote the book Runaway Bunny and others. Her private collection of papers and memorabilia are in our Westerly Library. And those, of course, because they're rare, they can be accessed, again, through special appointment with your local research librarian. Cemetery records. In the local history room, we do have, in addition to that one database I mentioned earlier, we do have cemetery records. Dwight, again, Dwight, you're amazing, because every time I find something else that you've written, I'm just amazed at the quality of the work. Dwight and his late wife, Anna, cataloged every grave in Riverbend Cemetery, which is the main cemetery along the river here in Westerly. And I think it's up to 2000, 2001, last time I checked.
I forget.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So to find a grave that's not necessarily deemed to be historical, because I'm told historical means 100 years old or more. Here you have every grave that was in existence up to the year 2000 is now in this. So now you don't have to put on your boots if it's February and go marching through you can just go up to the local history room if you're looking to find out, well, you know, where is the latest descendant buried and when did he die? Pull Dwight and Anna's book off the shelf and you've got it right there. So some of these things are just immense treasures for us. The fact that folks have taken the time during their lives to devote the energy to these works. I just feel so lucky, let's say, to be in a community that still values research, reading, and writing, as I mentioned in the beginning. All right. Frederick Dennison, Papers and Diaries. This is a PDF copy. It's printed from the internet. Some of you may have wondered why our newsletter is called Westerly's Witness. The premier book about, or probably the first major, and at the time was the most complete work of Westerly's history, was published in late 1870s. It covers our history through the year 1876, and it's called Westerly and Its Witnesses by the Reverend Frederick Dennison. So this, luckily, is available in a PDF copy from the internet. I downloaded and printed it, page by page, and I read it. And I'm thinking, anybody who is going to be the newsletter editor for the Westerly Historical Society better know what's in this book. It's kind of like required reading, okay, for the job that I have as a volunteer here. Following that was the Town That Saved the State, which is almost like the sequel. She recaps everything Dennison did with a fresh set of eyes, and then brings us up into the current century until about World War II. But Dennison, just real quick, was a very interesting character. He was a prolific writer. He really wasn't from around here that much. I mean, he did hold the position of pastor at 2 of our Baptist churches. He was here for a time, and then he went off someplace else. He served in the military. Maybe I'll just give you a real quick, rather than try to remember it. He was a preacher at the First Baptist Church here in Westerly from 1848 to 1854 before moving to Norwich, Connecticut. He would later return to Rhode Island and settle in Central Falls for a time. He wrote many poems, hymns, newspaper articles, memorial addresses, sermons, and his conservative opinions are evident throughout Westerly and its witnesses, where he freely condemns the evils of slavery, alcohol, and gambling, and more than a few amusing vignettes are to be found among its pages. But he would just fire off several pages of quatrains about how Joshua Babcock brought his bride, how they eloped to Westerly in a canoe from Newport against the wishes of her father, settled here, fought the Indians and the bears and everything else, and eventually Daddy came to visit when he heard he had a grandson. But that was, Dennison just wish I could find the page. I mean, his poem, his epic poem about this whole adventure about Joshua Babcock, they just, fired off like, 50 stanzas to tell the story, and it's quite poetic and it was quite fun to read. So I keep this red binder of my bootleg copy of Frederick Dennison handy at all times, because it is our first, it's almost like a Bible when you're talking about Westerly history. All right. Again, as I mentioned, I do have copies of this slide presentation, so you can see everything that's been put up on the screen up till now. When you on the way out, you can go ahead and pick up a copy. So, just a couple more things. Nonfiction. Let me take a walk over here, if you don't mind. Are we on camera? You're gonna have to spin your camera around a little bit just to follow me over here. I just want to talk about books for 1 second. I'm starting to get quite a collection of books, starting with this. But in the local history room, of course, the Westerly Historical Society, as you may realize, has put out several publications, most of which are still in print, because when we run out, we go to second printing. Some of them are in first printing. We still try to sell off what's left, but all good, all good. Veterans' war stories. These are people who served in the military and are from Westerly and the surrounding area, who have stories to tell about their time in the service. The stories are moving, they're stirring, they're exciting, they bring a tear to your eye, some of them. So our publications committee makes sure that the things that we've published in the past and are currently publishing are still made available as much as possible. You can pick these up on our website. Tom O'Connell has written no less than 4 books for us. Now, if you don't want to buy a book and you find that they're not circulating out of the local history room, check the circulating books at the reference desk. And yes, you can get Tom O'Connell's book, not from the local history room, but you can borrow it from the library out of the reference section, because they do have extra copies, enough for people to borrow. So that's nice to know. When I'm researching stuff, remember I talked about Google. Google's a good place to start, but you do get a lot of not in-depth things. So I might click on a Google article, and then what I would like to do is find out, well, what sources did they use? So for instance, this latest one I just picked up, I visit rare book websites. This was someone's thesis from 1970. And it happens to be, it's called A Productive Monopoly, and it's about the partnership between the New Haven Railroad and the steamboats. And how between the rail lines and the steamboats, they pretty much monopolized all of the shipping of goods up and down the Northeast coast. $17, and I had PayPal, give it to me, I want to see it. So I'm kind of becoming like a book addict. If I see a used book and it's under 20 bucks, I want it, and I'll take it and start looking through it. This is Mary Agnes Best, which again, as I retired from the Washington Trust, I said, I know you guys always take a collection up for a retirement gift. There's only one thing I really want. I want my own copy of Mary Agnes Best. The night came, they had the meatballs there, whatever, and I got my copy of the Mary, and they said, do you know how hard it was for us to find Mary? They had to send it away to Ohio, but this book, believe it or not, was published by the Utter Company. The Utter family owned the Westerly Sun for many years. They had a close connection with the Westerly Historical Society. I think one of the elder Utters was actually a charter and founding member of the Westerly Historical Society. Because of the Utters, books like this and this were published at very little cost because they had a hand in it. What else? I did a story about the gold rush. This is a story about all of the U.S.'s involvement in the gold rush, but I bought it, again, from a used bookseller or somewhere off eBay, a couple of bucks, maybe $4. And if you go to the index, you can find stuff about Rhode Island in this. What was our part in the gold rush? What kinds of folks left here to go dig for gold? So and that brings me to the circulating part of the reference area of the Westerly Library. Stuff that pertains to Westerly in particular is going to be in the local history room. But if you have a figure that was from Westerly and made a significant contribution to our local history, you may also find that he was nationally known or made some contribution that was significant enough to be included in a book about our national history. So I do refer to the circulating portion of the Westerly Library for certain things where the particular topic or individual was well known enough that I know he's going to be included in a book about the country as a whole. We were approached, this series, I'm sure you've all seen it. If you ever go in and out of a tourist trap, they always have a few of these. They always have this same kind of shield at the top. The entire series, this is the Images of America series. And this particular one is all about the life-saving and lighthouses along the Connecticut and Rhode Island coast. But anybody who has a particular love of a topic and wants to put out a book, we were contacted just recently by the Images of America series to find out if any of us here in Westerly are currently working on a topic that would be a candidate for a book-length publication. So they're always looking for research so that, so they can preserve the stories that make us who we are, topic by topic or perhaps town by town. Some of them are by town. You might find one that's all about I've seen the Watch Hill one. There's a Watch Hill one, there's a Mystic one, there's all kinds of stuff all the way down to places in New York, but that's also a good series. All right, so what else? I think we're about, we just kind of want to open it up to other folks who have stuff that they'd like to contribute, because I'd like to learn as much from you as you are from me. Can we go to the next? As I mentioned earlier, keep going. The Westerly Library, okay, we talked about the circulating section of the nonfiction reference area at the library. As I just mentioned, you can pick up some of our Westerly Historical Society publications. The 4 books by Tom O'Connell are there. I don't know, Dwight, if any of yours are in the circulating area. I have to check someday when I go in there. Books on U.S. or New England history are there. You may find things about Westerly there. They have the Westerly Sun on microfilm for most of the 20th century. There have been some fits and starts about getting those digitized for internet use, and so far it's a complicated story that involves grants and then not grants and manpower and things. So but eventually we hope the day will come that that Westerly Sun would be part of a larger database like newspapers.com, where you can just look up a topic. And newspapers.com I didn't put on the list, but I like newspapers.com because they have a kind of technology that even though these are old PDF copies of newspapers, it's searchable. You put in a term and it comes up yellow, wherever it is. And old newspapers are hard to read sometimes because they're, it's just, the quality is kind of blurry sometimes, but it's kind of fun to dig through those. The head research librarian's name is Nina Wright. She has an excellent staff. She spent about an hour on the phone with me on Friday just making sure I had all my T's crossed and my I's dotted. Westerly's Witness, the Westerly Historical Society newsletter, is available at the library, the hard copies, because we mail them a copy every month. Real quick, Mystic Seaport, they have a wonderful research library there. A lot of people have visited Mystic Seaport to visit the old ships. Once you pay one price, you can stroll around the entire seaport the rest of the day. And that included with your admission is, for instance, you can climb aboard the Charles W. Morgan and look inside an old whaling ship. The only ship that you have to pay to get on would be the Sabino, which is a river cruise and takes you away from the park for a time. Let's go to the next slide and look at what's at Mystic Seaport. Hello. Next slide. Okay. Shipmaster, all these things. I don't want to go through. You can see for yourself, and you can take it home because, as I said, I did print out copies of these slides, and you can take it along with you just for reference later on. I did visit there back in January or February this year on a cold winter day with nobody around. The wind was blowing and I was freezing. I made it from the parking lot, the long walk, into the, I think it's the C.W. Blunt Research Library. It's in an old mill building. They have collections, not just books, but collections, papers, We know from our own holdings, we have upstairs some books and papers as well as some very rare books out of print here in this building. Some of this stuff is just so old that we do want to guard it very carefully. At Mystic, they have a lot of rules. I had to leave my coat, my purse, any books and papers that I brought with me in the sitting area in front of the main desk. I had on a piece of paper the particular folder and box number of material I wanted to see. They told me, you may bring in a number 2 pencil and a piece of paper. Please wait. While you're waiting, if you would kindly wash your hands with our special soap in the lavatory to the left. If you don't feel like washing up, we will give you white gloves. So I washed, sat down with my knitted pencil. Oh, and if you don't have a pencil, we will give you one. No, why no pens? Well, we don't want any ink marks on our materials. Even by accident, we know you don't mean to hurt our materials, but we'd rather just take a pencil and do what we say. So it was a wonderful afternoon because I had my hands on some correspondence and actually photographs that were more than 150 years old, and they were lovingly preserved. But while I was there was another fellow who was researching the construction of an old ship, and he actually, they brought him rolls of blueprints of the actual ship, and those can be reproduced and purchased for a price from Mystic Seaport. So if you're serious into antique ship architecture, or you really, or maybe this fellow was interested in building a repro, I don't know what kind of mission he was on, but I thought that's just fascinating that you can actually get out the actual blueprint from an antique ship, and they've saved it, and then you can buy your own copy of it if you want it to be reproduced. Crew lists. I'll just read real quick what they have on their website. The Collections Research Center is the nation's leading maritime research facility, located across the street from Mystic Seaport. The former J. Rossi Velvet Company houses the museum's collections and offers safe and easy access to maritime researchers and scholars. Artifacts at the CRC include more than 2 million examples of maritime art, artifacts, tools, buildings, imprints, and other documents. Photographs, 1,000 ships registers, 600 audio-taped oral history interviews, 200 videotaped interviews, and 1.5 million feet of historic and contemporary maritime-related footage. The CRC opened in the fall of 2002 and was designed to exceed national museum standards for conservation, preservation, accessibility, and safety. The Research Center provides cutting-edge temperature and humidity control for the museum's artifacts, and also boasts audio-video production suites and extensive photo processing and digitizing labs. And by the way, I did find that one photograph that I was touching. I took a picture of it on my phone, but ordinarily, as an educational institution as we are allowed to reproduce excerpts from other works, including photographs, under what they call fair use, which means you're not going to plagiarize an entire work, but if there's an excerpt or a photo that is relative to your article, under fair use, under copyright laws, you can take that photograph or excerpt and put it into your work, so long as you give credit as to where did this come from. So, not with Mystic. In Mystic, they tell you, if you're going to use something, even if it's fair use, please email us, tell us the exact thing that you want to run in your publication, what is the name of your publication, when is it going to run, and what is it about, and all that stuff. And then the head of their, she has a certain title, but media something or other, will email you back and say, okay, I approve, God bless you. Only then may you then use their content, even though to me it was fair use. So in a way it's a little sticky to navigate through all the rules and regulations, but on the other hand, they're doing their utmost to preserve everything and to make sure. I mean, let's say I had a beef with this particular photo of this old sailor named Tom Sheridan. Let's say, well, I thought Tom Sheridan was a schizophrenic or something. I'm sure they wouldn't want me to do that because it's just contrary to perhaps the truth. So they filter everything that gets reproduced from their archives. All right, so I talked a little bit about our go-to books. I think we're about at the end here. I'll let you kind of paw through the things that I've left on the table. There's just kind of a random collection of things that I tend to put my hands on when I'm looking for stuff. Oh, one big, great book, which I didn't bring, Watch Hill Through Time. Chaplain V. Barnes died within the last 10 years. I don't have his exact date of birth, but he put out a wonderful, it's a coffee table book. And it's probably, to me, the most comprehensive history of Watch Hill, all the way back to Chief Ninograd, when there was nothing there but the Indians and some weeds. It is downloadable for free. You can get it in PDF, but on every page it says may not be reproduced. So obviously, they're also very protective of that particular publication. If you'd like to order a copy, it is available. I think for about $8, and you can order it right from that same website. So if you do Google Watch Hill Through Time, you'll see all the content of Barnes's book. We talked briefly about the Babcock Smith House Museum holdings and the Westerly Historical Society holdings. Our printed matter is upstairs right above us in this room here, a little further back. We do have on our shelves, as I said, some very rare works, as well as the contemporary works of Dwight, Tom O'Connell, Howard Burdick was a 20th century figure, no longer living. And we do have, there are certain collections of papers, they're rare. So I would say this, if you need to borrow something that you think we have, first check the circulating at the library, then the non-circulating out of our local history room. Ask the research librarians if there's anything on the internet that you may get. I mentioned at the start of the talk how folks would have to present their paper in front of the membership to gain, to become a member of the Westerly Historical Society. Those little essays have been collated into various books throughout the year. I think the very first one is 3 papers presented to the Westerly Historical Society from the years 1913 to 1915. Again, published and bound by the Utters of the Utter Company. And they, through the years, did collate and publish for posterity's sake a lot of these papers that were presented for membership to the Westerly Historical Society. Those are available in the local history room. We have them here too, but we'd rather not have people, you know, going over them too much because they're going to wear out if too many people handle them. So we would say, try the local history room first. Now, if all else fails and you're like, gosh, there's just something I really need, you would probably want to approach one of our docents, one of the Babcock Smith House docents, and explain what you're looking for and see if they know if it's in that stuff upstairs. Then and only then, if you ask nicely, you may be lucky enough to get an appointment to come in and sit upstairs and take notes out of some of the materials that can be found there. I've asked if I could please take a particular book home. I'm on the board, the answer is still no. So again, I just ask that you respect their wishes. We do safeguard our materials very carefully. The printed matter that is upstairs is really now a joint library that contains works owned from both organizations, the Museum House and the Westerly Historical Society. We decided, for the sake of efficiency, to merge our holdings into one library. It makes more sense that way. And that way, we also found that we have duplicates, which is good, so that we have one more copy. So, just to finish real quick, you never know where you can find a particular tidbit. You just never know. For me, it's always an adventure to do research. Questions always lead to more questions. People you meet lead you to get to more sources or people. Can we flip forward here? I've actually gone to YouTube. Sometimes you can get oral histories there on YouTube. Old newsreels, even old movies, if researching theaters, movie houses, or performers, have done that. Mentioned the docents. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Charlene Senecal, the Yale archivist who spoke in town at the library within the last year or so. Sometimes it's not printed matter at all. It's the artifact. And her world, her professional employment, takes her into a world where they actually archive things rather than books and papers. And history, there was a painting on the wall, it was kind of a folk art, it wasn't very well done, it was what they call folk art genre. And it was one of our town fathers, and he had one of those kind of flouncy shirts, and right in the middle was a pin. I think he was a silversmith, and the pin was a silver pin. Well, come to find out, she actually found out who has that pin. I think she dug into the, all the, what do they call it? Ascension records, when an archivist acquires more things. She dug into the catalog of records of artifacts at the Westerly Library, because they too are the owners of quite a lot of historical artifacts, and found out that the pin is actually still in the library, the very one that was in the painting on the guy. So those kind of aha moments are kind of neat, the fact that, you know, because you found something that nobody else knows. Go ahead.
Just if I can contribute, that pin is currently on display along with the portrait of Thomas Noyes Rogers.
Noyes Rogers, yes, thank you very much. My mind, my memory is.
Barbara and I worked to help put that exhibit together, so you can see those two amongst many other items from that Noyes collection at the library. It will go until Thanksgiving time.
And she had a wealth. I'd love to maybe even repeat some other things that Charlene spoke about that evening. That was a wonderful talk, by the way. So. Last slide. This is my, what does RQ plus RP equals RA mean? I would tell a funny story about a college professor, or was it maybe high school professor, had the kids, said, I want you, tomorrow for homework, I want you to all go downtown, and I want you to tell me the height of the MetLife building in New York City, or whatever, where they were around New York City area. And so, you know, the students went right to work and discovered that there's about at least 4, if not more, ways of figuring out the height of a building that is too tall for a tape measure. You know, one of which is like you can take take the shadow of something that you know the height of, and then compare that shadow relative to the height of the unknown thing who's also casting a shadow. Or you can maybe measure the distance along the ground, and then you take a straw at a 45-degree angle and you get the hypotenuse, and using, you know, triangular geometry, you can kind of figure out that last side, what the height of your building is going to be, and so forth. Well, anyway, the kids spent, you know, all afternoon figuring out the height of this building, and some of them got it wrong because they weren't that careful anyway. But the one kid, he didn't go with the rest of the kids downtown to do the, you know, to try to get the answer. And but the next day he handed it in. He had the right number. And the professor said, "Oh, I heard you didn't go with the kids yesterday when everybody else went downtown. So how'd you get the answer?" He goes, "Well, I can show you my formula." And the professor said, "All right, show me your formula." So he says, RQ plus RP equals RA. He goes, "All right, what does that mean?" He goes, "Well, I simply telephoned the architect and asked him. So my formula is the right question plus the right person equals the right answer." So that's all I can say is, when you're doing research, maybe start with somebody who you think knows something about it. Go to them first, and then they can direct you and guide you as to what is the best resources where you need to start to get your topic going. So with that, I definitely, as I promised, other folks, please come forward and share with us perhaps some of the stories that you would like us to know about, or the things that you've researched, or perhaps the topics you've enjoyed writing about in your experiences, so that, you know, we can maybe exchange our experiences and learn from each other. Okay. Oh, and does anybody have any questions before the next person comes up? Not yet. Okay. Please, if you'd like. I would love to hear more about. Yes, I would love to hear more about the library. Definitely.
Oh, not Barbara.
No.
Well, I'll just stand here. Not knowing that I was going to be asked to talk about this, I'll do my best. As part of the 125th anniversary celebration of the Westerly Library, a number of different events are taking place.
Yes. Will you introduce yourself first?
Oh, my name
also,
is,
it's being taped.
My name is Mary Weiss. I live here in Westerly. History was my favorite subject in college. I was a history major, but then I went on to do other things. Retired here and just became involved in different local activities. And fortunately, I met some lovely people, including Barbara here, and became involved in this effort to display what we call unique objects from the library's special collections. And so some of those relate to Thomas Noyes Rogers, and Charlene Senecal was certainly a great resource for us. So speaking with her speaking with her personally and hearing her give a talk inspired us to put some things together. And I was a part of a group that went to find different things in the library, and we went to the safe in the library, not this so-called vault in the local history room, but the safe. And in that safe, locked away, are a number of these items, including the stick pin, buckles from the shoes, a number of different spoons. Mr. Rogers was a silversmith, along with many other different occupations. So we had fortunately just had this wonderful exhibit at Yale of Rhode Island furniture, and the Stillman clock, which was purchased by Mr. Rogers in 1807, had come back to the library along with a number of other exhibits, items that were exhibited there. So we had that one sort of knocked as to how we were going to present that. Plus we have the original receipt from 1807 by Mr. Stillman to Mr. Rogers. I think it was $63.70 or something. So we also display that. But as you come into the Hoxie Gallery, which is on the second floor of the library, you will come in and see, I'm writing it up actually for a talk I'm giving October 3rd, 15 different exhibit areas. And they're an eclectic grouping. We, because chronologically, you could say we start with the 1660 purchase agreement of Misquamicut from, I think he was called, I don't know if he was a captain or a sergeant, but an Indian, Native American, all the way up to Margaret Wise Brown. And since Margaret Wise Brown was mentioned, we have examples in her own handwriting and some annotated ones that she had typed. We have original manuscripts, we have original books. One of my favorites is the one that's done in rabbit fur. I think it was one of the first touch and feel books. We have original illustrations from her books, The Calicut Winter from 1947, The Little Island. So please come, the exhibit's going to, it's free. The exhibit's going to run up until Thanksgiving, as I said. It's open regular library hours, so it goes into the evening if you can't make it during the day. And my talk is on October 3rd, so if you'd like to get some more of the so-called backstory, some of which we're still working on. So thank you very much for this opportunity to make the pitch.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? Sure. Open mic. Can we shut the screen for now? We can dump our slides.
Hello, my name is Pamela Scott. I'm the program director here for the Historical Society. And I really appreciate your talk today. And I want to remind everyone, all research isn't necessarily centered at Westerly. Our family's research has been everywhere else. And I've taken a lot of Ann's tips and taken them to other towns. Charleston, South Carolina, the local history room at the public library, plus stopping around the cemetery as well. Pittsburgh, the local history room at the public library. Now I make sure that all our trips include a weekday when the library is open, and we seem to walk around cemeteries right and left. And as we've found, some cemeteries have kiosks that you can search, and some have books very similar to what Dwight and Anna have produced that are in the local history rooms that you need to find to be able to do your research. Fall River was where my grandmother's family came from, and we did exactly that. Walked, found the area of the cemetery that was pertinent to the Andrews, and walked that section and saw so many family and a lot of pink granite from Westerly on those stones. So our research has been centered at other cities, but using very similar tools. So again, thanks Anne, thanks for a great time.
Thank you, and please There are things to take home there. The stapled sheets are for everyone, so copies of our slides, and as I mentioned earlier in the talk, some of our reprints from 2014 about the URI special collections, and another article talks about the cemeteries database. So please feel free to take as many of those handouts you would like, and you can also browse through some of our random books that I've left there on the table, just so you can see where my mind goes sometimes. But again,
Thanks again, Anne. And I want to remind everyone our next talk will be next week, October 1st, with Christian Burney, speaking about World War II and Rhode Islanders. And if you are a World War II veteran or have a neighbor who is, bring them to share their stories. They'll be meeting with the author 1 hour earlier at 1 o'clock here in this room. So again, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you, Anne.
So.
How did you get here?
Everything is summer day. It feels like summer even though we're into fall already. My name's Ann Smith. I'm the presenter today. I'm also the treasurer and board member of Westerly Historical Society, and I have the dubious distinction of being our newsletter editor-in-chief, and our newsletter is called Westerly's Witness. I want to welcome all of our current and future researchers today, because I know that even though people perhaps aren't currently involved in writing and researching, I always say there's a little bit of a researcher in all of us. So towards the end of the program, we're going to switch to a more of a symposium format. So if any of you that are with us today would like to share